So, Kyle and Ariel, we are so excited to have you on the Team Us podcast. So, we both love to hear how couples met. But because we have kind of a short podcast, we always like to give the challenge to do it in 3 minutes or less. So, in 3 minutes or less, tell us like how you met and how long you've been together.
First of all, I love the challenge, but secondly,
Challenge accepted. Let's
Yes.
see if we can do it in 30 in 60 seconds. You ready?
Deal.
All right. So we actually met in sixth grade and we dated in middle school, if you could believe it. And after 4 months, she broke my heart. She broke up with me. Well, and it was because I was in that like clingy 14-year-old guy phase.
It's a little clingy, and I was a strong, independent woman at the time.
Yeah, but we maintained a friendship after that, and then I toured in a rock band at the age of 19, and always kept in touch with Ariel because I could always get along well with her. So what happened afterwards is I got off tour and I started hanging out with Ariel again, and neither one of us planned to have a relationship with each other. We just liked each other. We just thought we could do the craziest things in front of each other and just feel accepted and loved by each other.
Yeah.
And who would have thought that that would actually blossom into a relationship? I had no plan at all to actually be married to her. She had no plan at all to be married to me. So much so that the very first time we started hanging out, we went to a dock overlooking Lake Erie. And I remember looking to her. It was a beautiful starry night overlooking the water. And I looked at Ariel right in the eye and I said, this would be really romantic if we actually liked each other.
And I actually kind of liked him at the time. So I was like, oh, okay. Guess that's my answer.
And you want to know what happened? As God
Yes.
would have it, 7 years later, that was the same place where I asked her to marry me.
Yep.
Very nice.
I love
It's
that.
a great story.
It's like we have 4 daughters. And
Okay.
and especially in those teenage years, I'm like, this is a great time, those young teenage years, a great time to learn how to build friendships with guys too. And it sounds like your relationship really has that foundation of friendship, which I think makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were friends that also thought we were both attractive. And then that, as God kind of led us through, growing closer together with each other, everything else started to align. And we never thought that we'd be where we are today, where now our marriage, the very marriage that we did not plan for, is the same marriage that is impacting the lives of so many entrepreneur couples all over the world. And that's why we have to give God the glory for everything, because it just so wasn't planned, but everything always works out according to his plan, right?
Yes.
Good word.
I love that. Okay, so as entrepreneurs, you've talked about like the struggle to kind of turn off like the stresses and opportunities and work thoughts and to go into romance mode. And you have developed some techniques that have helped you guys do that. Can you share those?
Absolutely. So I'll kind of start and then you could fill in anything. So the first thing when it comes to transitioning from like work mode into what we call romance mode, right? They're two very different parts of your brain. And one of the things that I think is important to start with, and then I'll let you talk about the techniques though, is it doesn't just happen to you. Like when it comes to creating space and time to be together as a couple, it doesn't just happen to you. You have to actually create the space. And so the first thing, in my opinion, when it comes to wanting to spend more time together, wanting to be more present with each other, you have to actually create the space to do that. And then once you do that, then there's some pretty cool techniques that you can use to actually transition your brain from being in that like work task mode, lots of responsibility, to actually being present with each other. And again, in more romance mode. So
yeah, what we've discovered is that being in quote unquote romance mode requires you to actually feel something.
yes,
As wild as that is. When we're thinking about work, we're exactly doing that. We are thinking, we are processing, we are in our own minds. But in order to be romantic with our romantic partner, we have to transition somehow from thinking constantly to how we feel about each other. So there's a lot of different things that we've done over the years to actually put specific techniques in place that transition us from thinking about work to actually feeling the love for each other that brought us together in the first place. Couple things that really work is, number one, what we call nostalgic transitions. Nostalgic transitions basically leverages the power of human nostalgia to trigger certain emotions in the body. Practically what this looks like is on our cell phones, we will go through videos and photos of us in the past, having fantastic date nights, getting married, just enjoying wonderful times together as a couple. And just by watching those videos and looking at those photos, it tricks our mind to reliving those moments and actually triggers that same neurobiology and chemistry into our body. So that primes our mind to be more connected and emotional with our partner. And that's why we call it a nostalgic transition, because you're literally doing this to transition from work into romance mode. So I will do this before our date nights. I will do this before we spend time together on Sundays where we have blocked off time for each other. And it works every single time. It's crazy. Another technique that we use is called the treasure hunt. And this basically looks like when you're actually with your partner, your goal is to hunt for treasure. That treasure is simply just finding out a fact about them that you didn't know about before. And I remember a coach told me to do this. It wasn't called the treasure hunt. We named it something marketable and cool like that. but they challenged me to go on a date with Ariel and find out something about her that I didn't know about before. And I told this coach, I've been with Ariel for, years and years and years. We spend all the time in the world together. There's no way there's anything about her that I don't already know. But what'd you find out? When we went to a date night and I made that my goal, I found out that my wife was a huge Britney Spears fan when she was a girl. And I know that's like a silly thing, but I didn't know that about her. And it opened up in my mind a question. What else do I not know about her? So from that point forward, every single date night, we just made it a goal to find out a new piece of treasure from each other that we didn't know about before.
Yeah, some of our favorite questions to ask each other are like things around like what are some pet peeves that you have? What are some likes, dislikes? A question I like to ask Kyle a lot is, what's a thought that you've been thinking about regularly recently
that you don't know about?
that I don't know about. And so it's just kind of getting like, where has his mind been recently? And I get to learn so much about him. So
yeah. And then the last technique that has been really powerful for us is something we call the mortality frame. The mortality frame sounds morbid.
It is morbid.
Because it is. And it basically is just reminding ourselves that at some point we're both going to pass away, or one of us is probably going to pass away before the other. And in that moment, we already know that we're going to regret not spending more time together. So if we already know that, we can work backwards and remind ourselves that even though we can't promise tomorrow, we have today to enjoy each other. So we might as well accept it as the gift that it is.
I love that. They're all super practical. Like they are things that can be put in practice today.
Yes.
Which makes them just practical and accessible to couples.
So I was listening to your podcast, and you actually delve into these things even deeper. So if anybody's listening to this and intrigued, check out their podcast, because they dig deep into these things. It's really helpful.
Oh,
we appreciate that. Yeah, it's called the Couplepreneur Show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But thank you.
Let me throw in a question here. You talked about how you can get out of work mode to get into romance mode. What about the other way? What if you've got, how do you work as business partners? Or can you give any advice or any counsel on how best to work as partners in business?
Yeah.
Do you want to start?
I'll start. Yeah. So we've, at the time of this recording, we've had the opportunity to speak to thousands of entrepreneur couples, and we have coaching programs for entrepreneur couples from all over the world. And having done this for as long as we have, we've started to see some patterns of like, what is the fastest way to allow a couple to become aligned and grow a successful business together. And it really comes down to 4 core things, honestly. It's aligning on your vision, it's aligning on your goals, it's aligning on your strategy, and it's aligning on your roles. In that order: vision, goals, strategy, roles. Helps that it kind of rhymes a little bit. So and if we break each part of that down, here's what it tangibly looks like. The vision piece is basically asking the question for a couple: where do we ultimately see ourselves in the future? What does our lifestyle look like? Where do we both feel called to be? Who do we both feel called to be? What are our individual and shared values? And based on all that information, what does an ideal date in the life of us as a couple look like in the future? This is where everything starts, because if we don't start with the end in mind, so many couples find themselves growing businesses that they maybe don't care about to create an outcome that they don't care about. And therefore it just creates a second job that they may sometimes get benefit out of, but it's not really going anywhere. It's not creating not just a vision, but a unified vision. And a lot of couples, when they come to us, they're either in camp A, which is they don't have a clear vision. So that means that they're just going through the day to day and they don't know where they're ultimately headed. Or they're in camp B when they're in the division camp. Division is when you have two visions in one household. The prefix di equals two.
Yeah.
So if you have two visions, you have division in the household. So essentially, if you
Oh,
can both
Or
come
division.
or
yeah.
division, exactly.
right.
That's
So if you can
clever.
thank you. So if you come together and you unify your visions in a way that you both feel excited about and in a way that doesn't compromise your individuality in the process, that's where it all begins. And then once you have that clarified, then we work into the goals department.
Yep.
The difference between a goal and a vision is a goal is a measurable milestone that shows you are making progress towards making that vision a reality. So this looks like revenue goals. This looks like date night goals. This looks like, even health goals.
Yeah.
If you look at every arena of life and you set a tangible and measurable goal, that then goes down into the strategy level, which is step number 3. Based on your vision and your goals, that actually dictates the strategy that you take in business. Because you two as a couple, along with all of the other couples that are listening, your dynamic as a couple is different than the next couple.
Yep.
Your strengths and the way that they play with each other and complement each other are different than the next couple. So what we do that gets couples insane results in business is we combine what works in the marketplace to grow businesses with how they work as a couple.
Yeah.
And when you can find the Venn diagram of what gives you the most energy and allows you as a couple to excel in business, paired with objective strategic approaches that we've used to grow companies by tens of millions of dollars, that combination is what unlocks so much growth as a couple. And then once you're clear on the vision, the goals, and the strategy, when all of that is in place, then it's just a decision of who is doing what. And that's where the role clarity comes into play.
Interesting. That's really helpful. Thank you.
You got it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we all face demanding work schedules, and sometimes work schedules can be more demanding than others. And you've shared how you can't make that season necessarily easier on your spouse or your marriage, but you can make your communication skills better. So can you talk about that and how couples can put that into practice?
Yeah. So when we talk about the season being challenging, whatever season it is that you're in, we like to say you need to control the controllables. And what I mean by that is when you're in a particular challenging season, demanding work schedules, lots of pressure, lots of responsibility, you can't always change those things. There's some adjustments you can potentially make, but there's some things that are just circumstances that are outside of your control. But the two things that you can control are your actions and your attitudes. Now, how that plays into as a couple, your actions is how you treat your spouse. It's how you respect them and how you communicate to them. And your attitude comes out in your communication as well. So it's first of all looking at what can we actually control in the situation and and not getting stressed about the things that we can't control, and instead taking ownership over our actions and our attitudes, and therefore how we treat and communicate to our spouse. So that's the first thing I would say.
Yeah. And when it comes to the actual communication part, we actually have rules of what we do and what we don't say when we're communicating to our partner to basically ensure that we're encouraging each other in whatever season that we're in.
Rules of engagement,
Yeah.
so to speak.
And these rules of engagement have become so popular with our clients that we've actually had couples go through our coaching programs and they will print out these rules and they will put it on their mirrors to remind them that no matter how hard times get, we are going to respect each other. So to give you some examples of the rules that we live by, one of them is we never attack our partner's character. Instead, we will provide feedback on the topic, but we will not provide criticism of our partner's character.
Yeah.
So
for example, if, in business, if there's a business decision that we disagree on, I will never say to Kyle, hey, you're dumb for thinking this, or I don't, you're not as intelligent in this arena as you should be, or I would never attack his character or who he is as a person. But what I would do is I would provide objective feedback that I can observe in the situation. So that's hey, I observe that you're, this is your thought in this particular arena of the business. Whether I disagree or agree, we go there. But regardless, we're providing objective feedback on the idea, not on the person that created the idea.
Yeah. And some other rules too are we don't raise our voices or use a harsh tone. And we actually talk to each other just like we would talk to a team member publicly. And for a lot of entrepreneur couples and couples in general, we sometimes feel so comfortable with each other that we will say things to each other and talk to each other in ways that we would never talk to another team member. But there were times in our relationship where Ariel would look at me during some, heated moments, and she asked the question that changed my life, which was, would you ever talk to a team member this way? And I realized the answer is no, I wouldn't. And then she's like, okay, well, why would you talk to me that way?
Yeah.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like, you know what? You're 100% right. So anytime we communicate, especially during hard times, we always set out to have a win-win scenario where I'm not trying to win my idea over her. I'm not trying to criticize her. And I make sure that I watch the tone that I use and I speak with her with the respect and admiration she deserves, just like I would with another team member. So we have a lot of different rules for engagement for that, but those are just some examples that we use.
One last thing I think I'll add to is kind of like a mantra of ours, which is remember that we're a team.
Yeah.
When you're in a really hard season, it's very easy to turn on your teammate. It's very easy to blame them. It's very easy to want to externalize the problem that you're experiencing onto somebody else. Versus like whenever we're experiencing that, we'll kind of like say to each other and check each other like, hey, remember, we're on the same team. It's not who's right, it's what's right.
Right.
And we're in this together. We both ultimately want the same goal. So how can we get there in a way that allows us to achieve the goal in a peaceful manner?
That is so good. I mean, that's just good for couples in general,
Yeah.
whether they are entrepreneurs or not. Okay, so you mentioned your podcast. Where else can people find and connect with you online? Because it sounds like you have a lot of great resources.
Yeah. So speaking of resources, I would say one of the best places to connect with us is our Instagram. So if you go at Couplepreneurs, that's our handle. And for anybody who's listening, if you're interested in a quarterly goal planning template that's specifically designed for couples in business, but it's helpful for couples in general, you could just send us a message on Instagram with the word template and we'll send over that resource to you. So that would be the first place. But yeah, we have our podcast, The Couplepreneur Show, on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And then the other places, we actually have a Facebook group. It's called Successful Couples in Business. So if you go on Facebook and just search for that term, we should pop up at the top. You should see our smug mugs. And basically, that's a community where we wanted to bring together other entrepreneurial couples. When we were first figuring out this whole what we call couplepreneurship thing and how to grow businesses without growing apart in the process, we never saw a lot of other entrepreneurial couples, or if we did, there weren't good examples of them that we would necessarily want to model the fruits of. So because of that, we created a community of those types of people. So it's the largest community to my knowledge of other couplepreneurs.
Thousands of couplepreneurs in there. And we think it's the largest community on the planet of entrepreneur couples. So if anybody's listening and they want to join that, it's completely free. We share a bunch of resources in that and it's available to anybody who thinks they can get value out of it.
Yeah, and I actually joined it. And what I was impressed by is not just the content, but that the members of it were actively engaging.
Yes. Yeah.
Like there was conversation, there was responding. So I was like, that's a sign of a healthy Facebook group there. Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. You shared things that, I mean, we're going to go think about.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.